Here's our topic this morning. It's called an appointment with destiny. Look at somebody say an appointment with destiny. So let's go. Eyes down. Keep a grip of your seat. Don't get too excited, and we'll get going. It was dawn, mid-June. The sun had already started to rise. Large herds of wildebeest were already up and grazing and moving in the Serengeti. Tens of thousands of wildebeest was moving as the sun rose higher, burning everything in his path. Those great wildebeest started to move, looking for fresh grounds. No one knows how it happened. No one even knew who to look or where to look in a crowd in the herd where it would start. But every year it starts. Something shifts. Something moves. One of the great bulls stops munching. It lifts his head. It sniffs the air. Then suddenly it leaves the grazing grounds and walks in a direction. Something internal on the inside is giving it the direction to go. It never misses. They never go in the wrong direction. It starts. It begins to bellow as it goes, and before you know it, there's another one leaves the ground and begins to go. There's another one and another one. Within several hours now, there's tens of thousands of these wildebeests is beginning to move across the Serengeti and heading out of the Ngorongoro camp, heading out across on the African plains. Nobody knows why and how and who started and how it started, but every year it's the same thing. It begins to go for what is known in our lifetime as the greatest migration on the face of planet Earth. Something deep, something that man can't comprehend, something takes place, something stirs inside those great wildebeests when they begin to follow it, begin to follow the track and they know it's our time. Many will die on the road to their journey. It's just a huge circle they're taking. It takes months to get there. Many will die. Some will die in the drought that will be ongoing for weeks. Some will die because they'll face predators. There'll be the packs of lions. There'll be the hyenas that will hide in and wait to ambush them. Then there's the river. I stood at the river one time, and the guide said this. He said, this river is where the crocodiles wait on them. He said, you've seen it on the movies where the great wildebeest jump into the river to swim across, and the crocodiles are there en masse waiting to have lunch. So many will die by the predators, the lions, the hyenas, and the crocodiles. There's those cows that will calve and give birth on the way. Many of those calves will never survive either. They'll be stolen in a second. Before they even get their first breath, they'll be munched. They'll be eaten by something else that's waiting on them. But still, they make the journey. Still, they make the trek. It doesn't matter what waits and what goes. There's something inside says, we've got to do it. All types of names are given to this call. Maybe they call the call of the wild, a natural instinct. I like to call it destiny. For when destiny calls, you can argue with it for a while and you can sit down and say, I'm not going, but it will never leave you. It stirs you deep on the inside to one day you'll say, I don't know where I'm going and I don't know what this will cost me. And we may die on the journey going, but I tell you what, here I come, ready or not. They tell me the salmon is exactly the same. It spawns in the inlets, in the freshwater inlets, even of our own nation. They spawn here. But every year there's something inside that salmon, and we don't know what it is. You can't pull it out and say it's this little mechanical organ here or something. There's just something happens when the great salmon stops feeding, flicks his tail, and heads out towards the Atlantic, and goes up towards Greenland and Iceland and begins to breed. Goes by every year, just tracks the whole way, thousands of miles up on the Greenland and Iceland and the Arctic shores. And when they get there, then they breathe, and then they come back. And I don't know how they do it and what type of GPS sat-nav they have on the inside, but they come straight back to the waters that they left, thousands of miles away, and that they do it. Something inside them stirs. Or the swallows. We hardly even see the swallows anymore. You see swallows now, Frank, down where you are? The swallows, every year, they take off. huge flocks, migration again of the swallows, and they fly. There's tiny little birds, and they say some of them fly 200 miles a day. Sometimes they're flying for 40 days to get to Africa, and they do it every year. A huge migration when they leave the shores of the UK, when they leave Northern Ireland, and they fly every year to South Africa. Most of them don't make it. They die of exhaustion. Some of them will fly 200 miles and stop. Some of them then picks up the next day and the next day. Many don't. They're just so desperate to get to long, and on the inside of them, they drop from the skies as they go in desperation to fulfill their destiny. If we see that in nature, then why would we even doubt that you and I, which is the highest, the greatest of God's creation, that if God could do that to the lowly animals and put something inside them, do you not think that that is his masterpieces? Do you not think he has a master plan for each and every one of us? I want to awaken you today and tell you he has something. And in the days that lie ahead, that stirring is going to become more and more and more evident within you. You are not here by accident even this morning. You are here by divine design, because the Holy Spirit brought you in here. He's got something to say to you. This is a beginning. This is one of what we would call a divine appointment. Church is a great place for a divine appointment, when the Creator of the ends of the world can begin to speak to you and talk to you. He'll say something. Something could be said, a sentence, a word, a paragraph. Nobody else heard it, but you heard it, and it spoke to you, and it got you going, and your lights come on the inside. Or maybe it's a vision that was imparted. You're sitting and you're watching, but suddenly it's like you're daydreaming, and you're seeing something else, and you can see yourself doing and going and being. A vision can be imparted in those divine appointments, or a thought, or a revelation from the Lord. Just one of those thoughts. Just one revelation can so alter the course of your life that you'd never be the same again. And before you know it, you're on the greatest journey of your lifetime. My friends, listen to me, you'll have many divine appointments in your lifetime. The Webster Dictionary's definition for destiny is very simple. It is something to which a person or a thing is destined to. It is a predetermined course of events, often held to be with irresistible power. That's what it is. Irresistible power. You can try to resist it, but it plain won't go away. The world will call it fate. We call it chance. We'll call it luck that you just got there. But for us, it's the power of God that's working through us, and it's working in us for a prepared place that God has already set aside for the course of our lifetime. It's when he begins to draw us, it begins to steer us towards his divine purposes. In Psalm 37 and verse 23, it says the steps, not the whole journey, the detailed steps. Where do we go next? What do we do now? The steps of a good man or a good woman are ordered of the Lord. They are prepared. They are set up. They are established of the Lord. Listen to the next one. Though he fall, how many will on the way through this journey? You may just slip and fall. You may fall badly. But let me tell you, though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord, he upholds him with his hands. Just at the minute you think it's all over, here's the Lord. He reaches in again, and somebody will come and prophesy to you, and somebody will come and look at you and preach to you and talk a message like this, and you'll suddenly realize, hey, it's not over. I wouldn't be thinking these thoughts if it was over. God's stirring me again and again and again. It's those appointments with the Creator is where he begins to lead us and begins to steer us on the pathway of our life. You don't have to be Andrew's age for to be steering in your life. You can be 80 years of age and still hear from God. And God said, I need you to do this. I want you to be there. I want you to have this in your lifetime. You have an appointment with destiny. In fact, your appointment with destiny, another word we could call it, is God's will for your life. Your appointment with destiny is God's purpose for you being alive. It is his plan for your life. I really believe every child should be taught this. This should be taught in schools. They should teach every children that every person alive has a purpose in being alive. You're not a numbskull. You're not a nobody. You're not a non-runner. You're not a reject. You were born for such a time as this, hand-chosen and picked by the Creator himself to be alive in this century. You're not an accident. The parents may have told you all types of stories. Somebody else may have said you're an accident. But let me tell you something. You are not an accident. You were not born too late. You were not born too early. No, 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 no. God knew before you were born who you would be. He planned your arrival. Your date of birth was planned by God himself. He needed you here so that you could be up and alive and running and thinking and doing by this point in your life. You weren't born too early. You weren't born too late. Before you were born, God had already planned your arrival. He planned where you would be born and into what family you would be born into. In fact, I wrote it this way one time for easier thinking for myself. I wrote it, your destiny precedes your conception. In other words, before I was even conceived in my mother's womb, God already knew Joe Corry. He already knew who I would be, where I would be, and what I'd do. And Jeremiah says, I knew you. I knew you before you were formed in your mommy's womb. Wow, he knew me before I was even formed in my mother's womb. If he knew me, then he planned for me to be, to do, to have, to see. He planned my destiny. In fact, my destiny was planned before my days began on the face of planet Earth. He planned my time in history. He planned the place where he would place me in world events. He planned the moment of my greatness when I would break forth and do what God wanted me to do. He planned my purpose for being alive at this time. Let me tell you, here's what I wrote last night. And I looked at it and I thought, what a statement. I'm alive because it's my time. And if it is my time, then the stopwatch of my life has already started. Did you get this? I wrote it last night and I looked again. And I looked at it. If I'm alive, it's because it's my time. And if it's my time, then the stopwatch on my life has already started. So you can sit back and do nothing and lie up in Lanzarote for 16 years and do whatever you want to do and build your empire. But the stopwatch is going. And the stopwatch doesn't stop until the end, until God says it's over. And in that period of time, we get to finish our destiny. We get to run our race. In fact, the Bible tells us that God declares the end from the beginning. And God already sees the end of it all. Then he goes back to the beginning and says, okay, let's get started. So God, who knows the end from the beginning, he knows when I would start and he knows how it will end for Joe Corry. And you know, he says, son, he says, come on, and I'll give you a blank page. Let's run this life together. So he decided, he knows how I'll end. He knows where I'll go. He said, just take my hand, Joe, and we'll walk through the pages of your destiny. When we go to weddings, because we have a large family, I've been at a few weddings now. Because I'm a pastor, I get invited to other people's weddings. But you know how it is, and maybe not in the country you're watching in, but in our country it's like this. There's always the dance. When you have the reception, you're already smiling. You're already thinking of the next dance you're going to have. Oh, absolutely. Well, you're going to have this, and you get to dance with your daddy. There's the what do you call that? The bride and the father and daughter dance. There's all these things you have to do. You have to dance. You have to practice at home. Anyway, but you do the dance. And here's how it is in Northern Ireland at the dance. The men all sit at the table and the women all get up. Does anybody know? You know, have you ever been there? And there's something in the men that don't want to dance. They want to sit and watch everybody else dance. And then their wives will come down and say, oh, come on, John, I love this wee song. Oh, come on. No, and the famous words is, I think I'll just sit this one out. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? I've used that line myself. That's how come I can write this one with confidence. I'll sit this one out. And you know what happens? You sit on, and you sit on, and you sit on. And before you know it, the night's over. The band is packed up as equipment, and it's time to go. And you've missed your chance to dance. Oh, I should have called I should have had that as the title. You missed your chance to dance. You had the opportunity to dance with the most beautiful woman in the whole ballroom. But you missed your chance to dance. When I found out there was a thing called destiny and purpose on my life, I decided one day, I will not miss my chance. When my opportunity comes, I'll take it. You'll only get one shot at it. There's only one life. And you get to my age now, time seems to speed up a bit. But you realize you haven't run at all. In fact, the only reason I'm alive, on my phone, I've got this. I've got it on my computers, I've got it on my phone, and I carry things like this. Maybe I'm just different from everybody else. I've got it larger than life on my computer. It's a file, and it's called My Heroes. And if you were to click on that, there's no words, it's photographs, but it's pictures of men and pictures of women that I preached with, that I ran with, that I did conferences with down through the years. People that Laura and I has traveled to different destinations with, and sang with, and talked with, and laughed together doing the work of the kingdom. But the reason they're up there now is because they're no longer alive. It's because they ran their race. I'm saying it now, on their faces is even coming before me. People that you had admired, people that you'd say, they're a great preacher. Look at the way he can prophesy. They would have said the same about me. We had no competition. We just buddies. We're going through, comrades, working through in the kingdom of God. But I've got them on a folder now. And every now and then I click it up. And I look at them because they're no longer with us. They've already ran the race. And God, they've gone to heaven. And every now and then I'd ask myself, how come you're still alive, Joe? Some of them were younger than you. Some of them were better preachers and better prophesiers than you. How come you're still alive? But I can only come up with the one conclusion, that I haven't finished my race yet. Look at somebody saying, neither have you. That we're running a race and he's kept us alive because we've still work to do. There is an enemy. And that enemy will do everything he can to stop you. He will distract you. He'll put obstacles on your way. He'll bring trials and difficulties and pain, and he'll bring sorrow into your life. Just to get you that you will decide somewhere, I'm not going to run. I'll just sit this one out. Then you'll miss your chance to dance. You'll make wrong choices. Everybody does. You'll make wrong choices. Someone will set you back a long time. Someone will only set you back short time. Sometimes there's detours. Jonah had a detour. He got on the wrong bus. He's on a number 48 bus going over to another country when God wanted him down here. So there's detours. That enemy knows how to belittle you, humiliate you, and shame you. He knows how to beguile you so that somewhere you sit down and think that God could never use someone like me, when in reality you were born to do this. This is not something that dropped onto your lap. This is not opportunity knocks. This is not something that somebody else wouldn't do, so here it is. This is you. For you were before you were created, God had already decided this is who you'll be, this is where you'll be, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Money is not your destiny. People seek after it like it's all there is in lifetime. Money is not your destiny. Some people spend it like there is no tomorrow, but money is not your destiny. If you put money ahead of everything, then you'll never go, you'll never do, and you'll sit out and you'll miss your chance to dance. Matthew 16 and verse 33, he says, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. And all these things. And these things he's talking about is everything the world wanted. He says, says, you follow me, you run with me, I can give you more than they could ever pay you. I can give you more than you've ever had. Your job, your career isn't your destiny. It's just something you have to do to put meat on the plate, to put butter in the cupboard. That's just something you have to do going through life. So never, never, never allow that to consume and take up your entire life. You do, you'll miss your chance to dance. I knew I should have called it that. Because somewhere you'll get so consumed with the career, with the money, that you'll stop trying. The conviction will stop tugging your heartstrings. And you'll never know what it's like. There's millions who sit right now in the place where you are. challenged with the challenges you have. Destiny's still talking to them, but they're dealing with it like you're dealing with it. Thousands, millions have the same thing as you, but there's thousands now, and they're faced right now ultimately with the same decision. Will it do it or will it not? But there's only hundreds. There's only hundreds that will actually run the race. The Bible says, and Jesus said it, many are called, but few are chosen. There's a better translation that says, many are called, but few make the choice. Few make the choice. In fact, Jesus said, he said, you know something? He says, the harvest is ripe. He said, I don't have a problem with the harvest. He says, I have a problem finding laborers. He said, the laborers are few. I took an opportunity this week to watch some of the documentaries that is on our YouTube, etc., about the Chinese underground church. It fascinates me. I read these books all the time. I delve into these things. But I found this one clip in interview is an American guy who went into the underground church in China. He went in there to help teach some of the leaders. And when he went in, he was given this story, this documentary about it. And he said, when he got there, he says, 22 leaders had traveled for 13 hours, come in from different directions and many different varied ways of transport to get in so that nobody would notice where they were coming to. They came to a large tower block. When they were there, they wouldn't even get in the lift together to come up to the floor where the meeting was going to be held. They come in several different locations, 7 different times, so that nobody would notice that they were there, into a secret location. They would get there until a high rise into the top floors, where there would be a hard wooden floor, a small room, hard wooden floor, curtains blanking out the window. And it said that it was over 30 degrees in the room, and there was no air conditioning. And they were going to be there for 3 days. He said, I was brought in to sit to talking for 3 days. When he got in there, he said, what time scale will we work till? They said, we'll start at 8 and you'll finish at 5 every day. Said, we'll pray for the rest of the time. They said, we want you to tell us about the Bible. We want you to tell us what God is doing and what God is saying. He said, I'd never faced such a thing like this. So he looked at around these people sitting, Chinese people, male and female, sitting cross-legged on a hard wooden floor with sweat running down them. And he said, what happens if we're caught? And they simply smiled and said, you'll be deported within 24 hours. They said, we'll go to prison for 3 years just for being in this room. So he said, there's 22 people in that room. He said, out of the 22, he said, how many of you have already been to prison? 18 of them raised their hands and said, we've already been in prison. He said they had no Bibles. They couldn't carry Bibles in case somebody would see them. He said, I've only 15 Bibles here. I'll pass them out. And he says, but I want to start reading from 2 Peter. And he said he noticed a woman that had a Bible. She gave her Bible over to the man sitting beside her. And he said, you will not need this. She says, I know 2 Peter. Says, I have it here and I have it here. She had memorized 2 Peter. He said, where did you learn that? She said, in prison. He said, I thought they confiscated Bibles in prison. She said, they do. But she says, what the people do is they'll write a verse on something that they're on a napkin or on the back of a shirt that they're giving you or a packet of sweet, and they'll write a verse, just one verse on there, and they'll pass it to you. And they said, we pass the verses round, and you learn the verses. She says, I know many verses. I know many verses. Memorized the Bible. So when there was no literal Bible there, they would memorize it. So he asked them the question. He says, collectively, and your leaders, he said, how many people do you oversee? So they took a minute and they talked amongst each other and they calculated and they said, we know now. And he said, how many people are you in charge of? How many people do you actually oversee as leaders? And they said, 20 million. 20 million. Unbelievable number of people. Said, but that's who we'll instruct. That's who. We have leaders underneath us, and we will meet with them and tell them what to say and what them to do. You cannot understand that there's 1.3 billion people in China, so this is just a small portion. He said because their meetings have to be so secretive, they meet in houses. They meet in caves. They said the latest one is now they meet in cars. And you'll go and pick somebody up and you'll go for a drive. And they'll just drive and drive and drive. And in the drive, then they worship God. And they have their worship. And they have their prayer meeting. And somebody in that car, as they're driving along, will preach. And they'll drive and drive and drive until church is over. And then they'll drop you back on. This is the only way to do it, so they won't get stopped. They know if they get stopped, they're going to prison. I sat listening with tears in my eyes and saying, dear God, we're playing church. I continued to listen to a man, an older man. His photograph was up, and in fact it wasn't his photograph, it was a clip of him being testified. And he said that in his testimony he was a frail old man, frail old guy. He was bent with age, but there was a fire in his eyes when he spoke. He talked of being 25 years in a communist prison. He says, I was tortured on a daily basis. Said everybody knew who I was. Because he was a main leader, they wanted to torture him to find out who the rest of the pastors was, who the rest of the people was. And how I know that he was bent over, he went to stand to say this bit. But he couldn't stand. He was bent with all the tortures over the years. And he said, they drove nails into my hand. When I told them about Jesus, they said, we'll do the same to you. And he said, they drove nails into my hands. And then he said this with tears. But he says, I never in 25 years, I never denied Jesus Christ. Nor did I tell them the name of one person that was attached to the church that I was with. I thought, wow. I put it on pause and I looked at his face. Just like everybody else. But there was something in his eyes that said it's different. He was prepared to die for what he did. The Apostle Paul was exactly the same in his day. Exactly the same. He said at the end of his life, he says, I've ran my race, I've finished my course. You know, there's a day I'll say that. Unless I go real quick and keel over and don't get a chance to say it. But if I'm lying somewhere, I get to say the same thing. I've ran my course. And I've finished my race. You got to understand this guy was able to say this, but when you go back till his early beginnings, he was at the top of his profession. This guy wasn't a numbskull. This guy didn't drop out of school. This guy had risen to the top of his profession. He would be what we would call a top earner. He's a top earner. He had all the benefits and the perks of the Roman Senate. Roman society that he lived in. Nowadays he would have been equal to a professor or a lecturer at university. He would have been equal to and carried the same qualifications as a lawyer or a barrister. His name was well known throughout the Roman Senate. He was highly esteemed amongst his colleagues. And the upper echelon knew exactly who he was. He was equal to the rest. His name was mentioned in the corridors of power. Till he had one encounter with Jesus Christ. Just one major encounter with destiny. With Jesus Christ. And that day he handed in his P45, his P60. He said, I won't be back, folks. In fact, I don't even think he put in the P45 and P60. He just never turned up on Monday morning. He said, it's over. One of the highest earners in the Senate. He just walked away from it after one encounter with his destiny. And he wrote this in Philippians 3:7. He says, the things that I once counted gain to me, he says, I now count as loss for Christ. Yet doubtful, and count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Jesus Christ my Lord, whom I now suffer the loss of all things, and do count them, as the King James's version calls it, count it like dung. He says, I'm counted like nothing, like less than all that schooling, all that stuff up there. He says, you know what I count it like now? It's like nothing to me in comparison to what I have now that beats dead in my bosom. Let me tell you something. He had eternity on the inside of him and was prepared. Once he glimpsed it, once he said, that's for me, he left everything at that moment in time and chased after it. My question is this, can you trust him with your life? And you say, well, let me put it this way. You say you're saved. That means you're trusting him with your eternity. That's the hereafter. But what about the here and now? Can you not trust him enough with the here and now? If you can trust him for a tomorrow that you've never walked in, how come you can't trust him to now that you're living in? Why aren't you doing what he wants you to do? You're actually right now on assignment. The stopwatch is gone in your life. You can't stop it. When the stopwatch stops, so does your heart. So does your brain. And you can't stop it ticking. You can't even stop. It's moving. It's moving through your destiny. The sands of time are going quickly. You can't even regain them. There's a heavenly mission on your life. And it's all about people. It's all about people. On my phone that I told you about, I know some of you will say, I need to get a look at your phone. I'm willing to show you my phone. I got no secrets on there. But let me tell you, on my phone, I have something that's a constant reminder to me. You've got to have things, signposts in your life. I've got this as a constant reminder. I got photographs in there of people in dugout canoes going up the Amazon. I've got people who's reaching tribes and standing in the middle of villages. I've got photographs in there of people that's ministering in marketplaces. I've got photographs of those that standing in villages in different regions and parts of the world. I got photographs of men and women who's standing in small gatherings, who's bringing forth the word of God to people in places like Latvia and Slovakia. I got photographs of them standing in small hovels and small rooms, maybe about 10 packed in. I've got another one of a man in Romania, and he's got 100 people crammed in there, and he's preaching the gospel to them. I've got photographs of people in there who's given up everything and stands in there in Latvia preaching the gospel. They've got no society backing, but they're there in Slovakia, in Poland, in Romania, in Hungary. I got photographs comes to me on a daily basis just from Africa. I've got photographs in there of people standing in Pakistan where it's dangerous to preach the gospel, but they're doing it openly, and blind eyes are opening and miracles and having. And Amanda, I've even got your previous photographs of Tibet. I've got Tibet even on my photographs, and because it's God, he keeps pumping this destiny stuff into me. I keep seeing there's a horizon out there. There's limitations that the world will put, but there's a horizon out there. There's destiny waiting out there. I've got photographs. A guy from Poland not so long ago sent me one in Warsaw of pastors and leaders who's not standing like the stand here. When you go to a leaders meeting and the music starts, they stand with always with the hand and the seat in front of them, looking like this while they're worshiping. But over there, they've got their hands in the air, and pastors are jumping up and down and weeping before the Lord and worshiping Him. I got photographs in there of people who has answered the call. Like the great wildebeest, they can't know when and where, but something happened inside. They got so stirred, they said, we've got to go. We've got to go. And they answered the call. I keep these things on my phone. Every now and then I flick through them. I've got wedding photographs. I got my dog on there. I got all this stuff here. I got lots of photographs of Laura on there. And I'll look at them. I got all the kids and grandkids. I got them on. Sometimes I'll look at them. But I always stop for a moment or two, the faraway shores where people has risked life and have give up everything. Some of those people is highly educated. Some of them weren't. But that wasn't the issue. They heard God say, let's go. I ministered one time away up at Ballygomartin. Ministered up there. It was a house meeting many, many years ago. It was a young man asked me. It was his mother and father was running the meeting, and so I went to the meeting. And at that night that I was with me, my sister was back from mission fields, and she was with me. And so I brought her to the meeting, and the young guy got up and played the guitar. And during the thing, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I don't need to preach here. My sister needs to go up and let them hear about the missions. And so I did that. As soon as the time they introduced me, I said, look, you can hear me anytime, but you can't hear her anytime. So let me just, give her a moment or two. And they agreed, and they went, and she got up and spoke. And then at the end, they came, and they were going to give me the offering. They were going to pay me for coming in. I said, well, I'll tell you. I said, I didn't do anything. I said, here's what you do. I said, I want you to give it to her. And I want you to give it to the missions that she is in charge of. And they said, that's a good idea. So they let me get up, and then for a moment or two I said, look, whatever you're going to give me, put it in this basket, and whoever else wants to give to missions, well, here's the lady, and you can give towards this. So she said, the lady that was running things, she says, let's just take a few minutes to get your checkbooks out and do all the things. And so they're going, and so the lady who's running it came up beside me, and she pushed me out of the road. You know, them Belfast people's like, she just pushed me out of the road, son. And she got the checkbook out, and she started to write. And she started to write the check. She stopped writing, and she looked up at me and she says, you know, God spoke to me years ago about going to India. And she continued to write. I said, wait a minute. I said, did you ever go to India? And she looked at me, she says, ach, you, Joe. She says, no, I never went. She says, I got married and things. I said, wait a minute. I said, God told you about India and you never went? She says, that's right. She says, I'm too old. I said, let me, wait a minute. Stop writing the check. I said, what you want to do now is go down. The money you were going to give into that missions, I said, I want you to go down Belfast tomorrow. I want you to go into a travel agent and ask them how much a ticket is to go to India. I said, anywhere in India will do you. And I said, buy yourself a round ticket, a return ticket to India. And I said, I need you to go. I said, you can go for 24 hours, you can go for 3 weeks. But I said, I need you to go to India because one day you'll die and you'll stand before Jesus and he'll say to you, how was it? And you'll have to turn around and say, I never went. I said, then that better you go, climb off the airplane, kiss the ground, get back on the plane and come home. At least you can say you've been. 10 days later, I got an invite by their family to come up to her funeral. That she had died suddenly in the night. 10 days, it was all it was, 10 days. She died suddenly in the night. And I stood in that little graveyard, surrounded by their family, surrounded by friends, and she had a lot of them, standing looking into the hole in the ground that they were about to drop the coffin into, the lowered end. And people that was there, and they were saying nice things. She was a great lady, and so she was. She was a real champion. Fun-loving person, a granny, you know the usual things, all that is. But as they were saying wonderful things, and the minister who knew her well began to say wonderful things, I couldn't help but this thought, but she never made it to India. She never made it to India. She missed her chance to dance. Who knows what was waiting on her in India? Instead, she spent her life in Ballygomartin. Who knows what and where that lady would have ended up, but she never made it to India. Many years ago, I had a phone. I'm almost there now with this message, but many years ago, I had a phone call from a pastor in Dublin. He was in desperation. I only met him one time, but I was in desperation. He said, Pastor Joe, I need your advice. I said, what's your problem? He said, I got a problem with my church. I got a problem with my church folks. I said, don't we all? Now that's before you came. Look at somebody say, that's before we came. You are a wonderful bunch of people to pastor. Fantastic. But let me tell you, he said, I'm having trouble. He said, the church board is a nightmare. He said, I got ideas, I got vision, I got dreams. He said, I got potential, I know what I can do. He said, but they won't let me. If I tell them I need to do this, this, and this, he said, they shoot me down. If I tell them God's told me to do this, they say, God didn't tell you at all. And he said, it's misery. It's misery. He said, I'm having to be like a puppet just doing what they tell me. And they said, the real me inside has never got a chance to be and go and do the things God has told me to do. He says, I know I can do it. And he said, I said, well, what's your problem? What's the question? He says, should I resign and let them win? I said, let me tell you, son, in this, there is no winners and losers. There's your destiny. He said, well, I resign and let them win. I said, no, listen to me. I said, and the wisdom of God just came upon me to say this. I said, if you knew, if you could know, if there was some way of knowing, and you knew you had only 2 years left to live, I said, would you stay where you are, and would you continue doing what you're doing? Would you stay there, full of potential, but never get a chance to do it? Would you stay there with the dreams inside it and never get a chance to exploit it? I said, would you do it if you'd only 2 years left to live? Would you stay? He says, I'm writing the letter of resignation while we're talking. And while we were talking, I had a vision. I saw a vision. I said, let me tell you, sir, what I'm seeing. And I saw him. He's a gentleman. I think he's from French. He must be from the Congo, French, Congolese gentleman. Tall, thin guy. Wonderful man. And anyway, I saw a picture of him in a vision. And he was like a warrior. And he was standing on this mountain. He was standing, it was like a flat mountain top. He was standing at this side, and he was overlooking a crowd. And he had a spear, and he had a shield like a chieftain. And he lifted the spear, and he says, and everybody down on this side was all talking among themselves and never looked once at him. So he raised it again like a chieftain, like a warrior. And these people just kept on talking and ignoring. And he put the shield down. But he walked to this side of the mountain, and there was another group of people, a mass of people that was standing looking up at him. And he went over and he raised the shield, and he raised the spear, and everybody down behind it raised theirs and shouted theirs, and there was a war cry coming out. He says, I see it, I see it, I see it. You need to see it. Your destiny maybe is not where you are right now, but your destiny will talk to you. It will waken you. It will stir you. You may not be called to the missions. And let me help you. If you're not called to the missions, send Amanda. Oh, yes. If you're not called to the mission, give her the money to go. If you're not called to the missions, don't go. Just go for another week in Lanzarote and pretend you're there. If you're not called to pastor, don't even attempt it. It'll kill you. If you're not an evangelist, don't attempt it. Somebody else will kill you. You'll find yourself in the wrong place. Maybe you are a businessman or a businesswoman. If that's your destiny, if that's why God has you alive, if that's your purpose in being, then be the best there is. Be full of integrity. Don't cheat people. Let your life, let your work, let your testimony shine where in that workplace you are. Be the best you can. Let people see the goodness of God. Lead them right in there. If you're a bus driver or forklift driver, housewife, salesperson, a teacher, insurance broker, a mechanic or a technician, be the best you are wherever you are until God says to do something else. There's broken hearts out there, and I'm closing. There's broken hearts out there. You don't have to go to Africa or India to find them. You'll not have to go any further than Rushmere. You'll not have to go any further than down the road before you'll bump into them. There's the broken-hearted people waiting for their hearts to be mended. They could be waiting on you. It could be your next divine appointment that you could bump into that person in Newcastle or the beaches of Torella. You could be somewhere in Port Stewart and Port Royce, and somebody's just desperate, needs help. Somebody's sick out there that needs healed. There's souls that need saved. There's backsliders that need restored. There's chance meetings that will happen to you on your way through life. You might meet them. Your next divine appointment might be standing at the bus stop that you stand at every day. They could be sitting in the cafe right beside you. So close you can hear their tea bag moving around in their teacup. But they're sitting there, and it could be another divine appointment just sitting there. Somebody waiting. Maybe it's somebody you walk past every day going to the shops. Or maybe it's somebody that walks past you while you're on your way to work. It could be a co-worker, a boss, or a storekeeper. But they got needs, and you got an anointing, and you have a calling. It's what makes you get out of bed, yawn a few times, scratch a few times, and say, let's see where this day takes us. It's wonderful if you get to go to some of them other nations. It's not as romantic as you think. You have to eat things you don't want to eat and do all types of stuff, but nevertheless, it has this romantic side of it that you're going somewhere. But you really don't have to go too far to find the suffering and the broken and the lost. And my brother and sister in the Lord, as we close, you have on the inside of you something unique, different to everybody else. God can visit you at a moment of time and anoint you so as you can set somebody free in a moment of time. You can talk all day to your sister or be in a locality and nobody ever gives you the time of day, and take your same ministry and go to County Fermanagh or go down there in the County Kerry, go somewhere else, and they long for you and they'll listen to every word you have to say. Sometimes you've got to go to France, or sometimes you've got to go to Uganda, or so. Sometimes you've got to go further away. But let me tell you, there's your destiny. It's larger than life. It's the call of the wild. It's your instinct. It's there. If all you ever do all day is just work for a company, and 25 years down the road they hand you a gold watch and you end up sitting in a rocking chair looking at a watch that a year later breaks down and doesn't work, and all of you look back through your life and say, what was that all about? Or somewhere you can say, I'll follow you, Jesus. Wherever you want me to be, wherever you want me to do. You can touch people's lives wherever you are. You can be exactly what God needs right in your home base. You'll never do it sitting at home now. Somewhere you're going to have to surrender it all and say, here I come, ready or not. He needs surrendered hearts this morning. You'd be surprised how fast when you surrender a heart, how fast the heartbeat of God begins to beat on the inside of you. And suddenly you feel it. You'll read a book. You'll hear a testimony. You'll listen to somebody else's stories. And something will trigger on the inside and you'll say, I got to go there. I got to help that person. I got to do something. I got to get out of bed. I've got to start and pray. If you can't go, at least pray for the people. Pray for the nations. Pray for, you know how this ministry started? This ministry started not on the streets. This ministry started in a prayer meeting. Because a few of us gathered to pray. We gathered in a room to pray. And we prayed for missionaries. And we would pray for souls and salvation of people. You remember, Joyce? Remember down in Pat's house? All meeting there and we're praying. That's all we did. We came to pray. We didn't come to preach. Didn't know how to do it back then. But we came to pray. But as we prayed, God began to move. And in the midst of praying, people would get healed. Then somebody said, Joe, would you share a scripture? So I shared a real short scripture and we'd pray. And God would move even more. Before you know it, we had 50 people in that little house. Before you know it, was expanded. They were in the hall and up the stairs and everywhere. And all we just kept doing, we just came to pray. So we just kept on praying and share a little scripture. And before you know it, one day God says, this is not big enough now. Let's go to a room, a hall. And we had to hire somewhere where we could have now what you could call church. It started somewhere, as yours will. It's somewhere. You've got to say, there's somebody that needs you. There's somebody that will welcome you with open arms. They're so depressed and they're so lonely and they just need you. They need you. They need you. They need you. So we got to close this morning. We'll close it this way. I'm going to pray. Father, you're in this room for sure. Several times in that message I could feel you stirring. I could feel you moving. You're touching hearts in this building. You're not asking everybody to go to Istanbul or wherever, but you're asking something of every one of us. A commitment, a recommitment, a do or die business, a full commitment, nothing else to live for, nothing else matters but Jesus Christ and the cross. The blood was shed so that we could be free, so we could tell the story. Miracles, signs, and wonders won't happen if it only happens here, but everybody keeps it in their closet and doesn't tell anybody it. The purpose in signs, wonders, and miracles is you go and tell people, if Jesus done this for me, Jesus can do this for you, and the message spreads. God, if there ever was a time that this island needs a move of God, it needs an awakening, if ever there was a time this island that I live on needs revival, it's now. We need born-again believers wakened and stepping up and stepping out to fulfill the call that's in their life. So as we surrender this morning, I thank you for the opportunities that you will present to us. In Jesus' name. I got to ask you, Are you ready to get committed? Here's how we'll do it. You stand to your feet. Standing to your feet simply means to the Lord, I'm yours. Whatever it is, whatever you want, I'm sold out. I'm going to do it. Whatever challenges. You know, at one time before I got saved, I refused to get saved because I was afraid God would send me to China. I was afraid. Why? The enemy lied to you. He never did send me to China. Sent me everywhere else, but he never sent me to China. So don't let fear interfere with your destiny and your purpose. He probably won't send you to anywhere you don't want to go. He'd put it in your heart first, and your heart will melt, and you'll be there afterwards. So if you're ready to commit, I need you to stand to your feet as an act of commitment unto Jesus Christ. If you're not ready to commit, then don't stand. Don't stand just to be seen. There's not enough of us here to matter. But you're doing it before the Master. If you're ready to commit, stand to your feet now. Just stand up. Don't worry. And if you're not going to do it, look, please don't stand because you never know who's looking at you. This is not why we're standing. Well, if you stand and God asks you tomorrow about going or doing or being, what are you going to do? You can't. He'll just turn around and say, well, wait a minute, you're the one that said yes. Absolutely. Father, you found a people. You found a people that won't be stopped. Won't be stopped. We probably don't have the money to go, to do, to be. We wouldn't have the money just to give up our job right now and go. But we'll say this to you. If that's what you're asking, we'll do it. If that's what it takes, then we say yes. We commit everything. We lay it on the table before you today. We know that's all life has for us. So we give it to you. We give you our life. Take us and use us as you will. In Jesus' name.